Yeah.
Everybody can see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. So like I said, I'm a concept artist and VisDev artist. Those terms are a little bit interchangeable. And, basically it just depends on the company that you're at. The roles are very similar. Concept art and VisDev, they basically come down to the job being coming up with ideas, right? And that's what a concept artist job is you once in a while get the opportunity to make beautiful paintings, and that's always fun, but it's really about what you bring to the table, your point of view and your perspective. So VisDev artist just tends to be the title of the role in animation, and concept artist tends to be the title of the role in games. But they are very similar jobs, at least in my experience. So these are some of the companies that I've worked for. I'm currently freelancing right now, but I've had a lot of, I've been really, really lucky. I think that I have definitely worked hard. It's not all luck, but I have been really lucky to work with some amazing teams and fantastic companies that you see here. But before that, I had many other jobs. So I think one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you all is because my my journey has been very non-traditional. I did not come straight out of school, get the amazing internship, and jump right into my career. It wasn't that easy for me. I went to school at a time when VisDev was not really taught. And maybe some of you can relate to this because, we're not at CalArts right now, and we're just not all able to go that route. And so for me, I had to kind of figure out my path. When I was coming up, motion design was a career that seemed feasible since I was not getting those kind of opportunities for what I really wanted to do. But I figured that I can learn After Effects and start working as an artist that way. So these are some of the companies that I worked as a motion designer and an art director, just kind of taking whatever I could. I worked in games a little bit, but it was mostly commercial advertising work that I was doing. And to go even a little bit further back, I worked as like a dog groomer. I worked as a waitress. I worked as a popcorn girl. I had so many jobs. So I just tell you guys this because it is possible to come literally from zero and make your own way. And that's what I did. So I hope that what I've been talking about today can help some of you guys with that motivation, because it is really hard, but it is possible. So from there, I did go to school as an undergrad. I went to the Academy of Art University. And at the time, like I said, there was not a lot of focus on how to become an artist in the industry. The focus of the school at the time was to become an illustrator for editorial illustration, mainly as an illustration major. So, maybe you guys don't even know what that is. It's such a dated job now. It's basically just doing illustrations for magazines and articles and fashion, and those kind of jobs are really hard to get into, especially as a newbie. They tend to hire people they already know, and that's how it is everywhere, but especially in this industry. So I was at a middle ground. I was kind of at the time when this role was dying out and animation was coming up, but it was just very uncertain times. So I went to this school and it was great. I just did not really come out of it with a very clear picture of what to do. So I finished school. Now what do I do? Portfolio was really bad. All I had in my portfolio were a few watercolor paintings, some figure drawings, and just like random stuff, because of the fact that my program was very, very just unstructured. I did not get an internship. And my future was very unclear. So I just had to work, and again, my school was all paid through loans. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I was committed to finishing school. So at this point, it was really just about how I was going to support myself. This is kind of a random place to put this quote, but I do like to just have it in this presentation because I think that we all go through art block, and I'll just read it very quickly. Artists don't get down to work until the pain of working is exceeded by the pain of not working. And I just think that this is so true for me, at least. I always feel like I just want to work. I just want to work. And I'm blaming everything. I'm blaming my life, my responsibilities for not giving me time to work. But then when I do have the time to work, I don't want to work. So I imagine that many of you might feel the same. And I think that it is very common and it's very normal. But as a creative person, we do have to work. I think that if you go too long without creating, you can get depressed. And that's all that this really means. And I've learned that over the years that while I was doing all these random jobs, the only motivation I had to keep going was because I knew that I had to make it work, because I was just going to be very, very unhappy deep in my soul if I didn't. So it's really just motivation out of pain and suffering. So really quickly, I'll just go through how I kind of got my start from working in retail and random jobs to moving into a job as an artist, being paid as an artist. I was able to get this random job at a local media company in San Francisco. They were doing a web series, and it was the first time that I had ever touched After Effects. So they needed somebody to just do random drawings to go over their web series. And we did a very, very light After Effects treatment. And this is an example of that. And I kind of fell in love with it. I am not trained as an animator, but learning how to make my images move became very addictive. And then that's kind of how I started that path. So I did that for a little while, but it was really dry. I had a hard time finding consistent work. I still had to have a job as like a receptionist at, you name it, at a fitness center or whatever. And so I realized that I needed to continue my education at this point. So I decided to move to New York, and this is an image that I painted earlier this year. Basically of that moment in my life. When I moved to New York, all I had was a duffel bag, literally just one bag, and I left everything else behind. In my apartment, I didn't know the people that I was moving in with. I just went there sight unseen because I had applied for grad school. So I had some other reasons for going to New York, but just as a quick overview, this is where I was at that point in my life. I went to Parsons, amazing school. I love New York City. I think that it was probably one of the best decisions that I made, even though it was the scariest decision I made. If you guys have the chance to live away from where you grew up, highly recommend it, especially when you're young. It just forces you to grow up fast. So this is kind of just a general random collection of things I did in school. I was very, very hungry to learn everything. So I learned After Effects rigging and character animation. I learned 3D modeling and texturing and the entire pipeline of the 3D process specifically, because I knew that that was going to help make me a marketable professional at this point, no matter what I wanted to do. This was helpful for me to become a motion designer and to become a concept artist, just because I could talk to the other people on the team. And I think that that's where, at this point, I learned all of the connections that I was making in my career, even if it didn't seem relevant at the time. When you're put into a team with people to make a project like a film, everybody comes from a different place in their life and they come from a different education. And if you can talk to them on a technical level, it's really helpful. So I don't do any of this anymore. I don't ask me to model anything or rig anything, but having that training helps me, to position myself in these environments now so that, people trust me when I say that I know what kind of limitations are going to be needed to make in the art so that they can work in a 3D or a 2D game or a film.
Awesome.
I'm gonna skip that. Okay, so now maybe I'll come back to this later, because this is a little bit about how my work changed over the years. But I think for now, I'll just stop here and we can go into the questions if that's okay.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. It's super cool to hear about like your journey and stuff. Oh, hold on, let me. Oh, sorry, my thing is glitching out. Oh well, that's fine. It's super cool to hear about your journey and all the things that you learned throughout your life. I was curious about just kind of like when did you first kind of start considering art as like a career, and what kind of process was that like, or like what kind of like inspired you to go to art school?
That's a great question. I think I kind of have a twofold answer, you know. I think as an artist, if you're an artist, you know you're an artist. You kind of know from a young age, everybody has the same story. You start drawing very young and you draw your favorite characters. I was drawing, you know, comic book characters, drawing like X-Men characters and Disney characters, all my favorite things. And I think I just knew in a kind of naive way that that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that I had to go to art school. And I was always a good student, but it was around my junior year of high school that I realized that I uh, I wasn't going to go to a normal college. You know, I needed to go to an art school. So I think that was the point that I realized that I had some AP art classes. But when I really committed to making this a career and really taking control of my life in that way, it wasn't until my mid to late 20s because that I think it took some time of the world just knocking me over a few times to realize that I really needed to make a change. So it was around the time but right before I moved to New York, because New
Mm.
York was the catalyst. It was a big commitment to go to a place that I had never been before and had no family. So that was around the time that I decided that.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. I guess let's see. Looking at some of the other questions I have. Yeah, I guess you kind of talked about some of like the roadblocks or challenges that you faced along the way. But I guess one question I had is like, was there like a particular challenge that you like struggled with, but felt like you really learned a lot from?
Let's see. There's many struggles.
So,
um, Okay, maybe we can contextualize that. Do you mean in terms of like being on the job or
oh,
more
yeah.
varied than that?
Yeah, I guess like yeah, like being on the job or like with any of the jobs that you've worked on, were there any times where you just like felt like really unmotivated and like how did you get out of that like funk?
Okay, yeah, I have a story there. So my one of my first jobs in the industry was a Disney job as a matte painter. So when I first moved to LA from New York, I got a job with a place called Mousetrap. So we were working on a Disney project. They were making basically a new castle for the Disneyland park, and they needed a new light show for the castle, and they needed artists to create the paintings that would be projected onto the castle.
Mhm.
So that was my first job in the industry, and I think that the main challenge going into that was when I was making my portfolio, I hadn't really considered what my target job was. You know, I was just like whatever job I could get, right? So I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I think that the biggest challenge at that point, they were asking me to do things that I just had never done before, which I was happy to do, but I didn't realize how much you still learn on the job, right? I think that at that point I thought that once you get there, you're good. You know what you're doing, everything's great and easy, and it wasn't like that.
Mhm.
I was really challenged. I was asked to create, for example, one of the paintings that I was asked to make was of like lava, like rock lava, and it was meant to show the Moana film, you know, and the point when Moana meets Taka.
Mhm.
Um, and I just could not get these lava rocks right. It was killing me. It was like I didn't know what was wrong with me, you know, like why can't I do this? And it was so hard for me to communicate with the art director. So I think at that point, what I learned is you just have to continuously talk to your art director. The
Mhm.
mistake that I made was that because I was so embarrassed that I wasn't getting it right on the first try, I would like avoid talking to him.
Yeah.
And I tried to just do it on my own, and that's a big mistake. You have to work with your team because that's what they're there for. And that was a really big learning curve very early in my career.
I bet, yeah. But that's definitely something that I struggle with of like, or probably people here as well, just like struggling to like figure out how to like reach out for help. So that's good that it's like encouraged and almost
Yeah.
basically required. Um, I guess let's see. Yeah, I guess like speaking of that, like how like with that process of like talking to people and stuff like that, were there any specific things that you had to learn to like contribute to a breakthrough in like improving your art and stuff like that? Or like kind of what the sorry, did that make sense? Like what process did you have or do you have for like improving art?
Yeah, that's actually where I think I can go back to my slide really quick to describe the turning point and how I made the switch into my career. So I will share my screen. Okay. So so while I was working as a motion designer, and I had just moved to New York, a couple of years after I started working as a motion designer, I realized that it wasn't enough for me because at that point, my only goal was to become a working artist. And I thought that no matter what I did, as long as I was getting paid to draw and make some kind of art, then I would be happy. And of course, whenever you attain one goal, there's always another goal. So, I was doing a lot of these commercial projects and it was just getting really, really tiresome. And if anybody has any experience doing that, or if you have any idea what that's about, it just gets to be kind of, if you're not really doing anything super creative, you're just kind of doing commercial work, it will kind of bring you down, and it's not really what you set out to do, right? So I realized that I needed to again expand my education, and at this point I had already been to grad school and I still needed more education, I realized. So that was a major turning point for me, because I just realized that there was so much that I didn't know about what it meant to work in the industry. So at that point I reached out. I was doing a lot of paintings on my own time, but I had no idea what I was really doing. So I realized that I needed a mentor. And this image here, this slide here, just kind of shows the giant gap that happens when you have the proper education. So on the left are just like, if you look closely, they're just like the photo studies, and they're super mushy. The perspective is super wonky. The
Yeah.
lighting is like, what is even happening? And the brush strokes are just all over the place. I clearly didn't know what I was doing, but this is the level that I was at. And once I got a mentor, he was able to really help facilitate, because I think that at a certain point you start to question your own ability, and you have to really believe that you do have the talent. You just kind of lack the structure and you lack the guidance, and that's where I was at. So he was able to kind of hone the skills that I had and give me a system so that I could learn. So now, if you look to the right, this image has strong fundamentals, and that's really all you need, I would say, to get started in the industry, is to show that you have strong fundamentals. So that just comes down to structure, perspective, values, volumetric drawing and lighting. And then you can put your kind of flair on it if you can figure out what you want your specialty to be. And I think through this process, I learned that I wanted my specialty to be environments and color. So I wouldn't have known that if I didn't work with a mentor. I would have just continued making mushy paintings, I think. So
Yeah.
that is what this image is meant to show.
How did you first find, or like how did you like first like reach out and find a mentor during this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't even know that I needed a mentor. I think I was literally just looking at tutorials on YouTube, and I came across this tutorial about brush strokes, about edges, and I really liked the teacher, and I found his website, and I found that he was offering a mentorship. So I literally just asked him. I just emailed him and asked if he had any spots open. And keep in mind, this was a big commitment for me to make because I had to pay for it out of my own pocket. I was working full time already, so I was basically looking at working 80-hour weeks potentially, because I was working full time, and the only time I would have to do my portfolio would be at nights and weekends. But this was the commitment that I was willing to make this happen. So I called him up. We talked for a couple of hours, and he was so generous with his time because of all these risks that I had in mind. I needed to make sure that I was going to get something out of it. So he was already full at the time, and I needed to wait 6 months to get into his mentorship. And during that time, I took courses online. So I took some schoolism courses to just kind of gear up and show him that I really was ready, and really that I wasn't completely new. And I just wanted to impress him. So so that's kind of how it happened. I think now there's a lot more opportunities for mentorship and a lot more opportunities. You just have to be very selective with what you choose because there's so much choice. You have to make sure you make the right choice, but don't be afraid to try things. If it doesn't work, you can, you can pivot. But it was literally just like that. Just
Yeah,
started with a Google search.
that's awesome. That's super cool. Good to know. Saving that for later. Um, going back to environment art, how did you first like get into it, and how did you like discover that like this is what you want to do, since there is so much choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I was in school, I tried everything, and that was to my detriment a little bit because I had no focus. But I do think it is important to try everything when you're starting out because you won't know what you want to do until you try it. Um, and nothing is going to hurt you. Learning any skill is never going to hurt you. So I do want to start by saying that whatever you're doing, if you feel like you don't like it or if you're not good at it right now, it will help you at some point. It never hurts to learn something new. But again, I didn't understand what a VisDev artist was. So I thought that I had to do characters and I had to do everything, and I really wanted to. But it was only through the process of working with my mentor and getting feedback and understanding the scope of the project. For example, if I wanted to do a project that had environments and characters and everything that was involved in characters, doing a lineup, doing facial expressions and costumes, I just found myself getting really, really down about it. Like it just wasn't really lighting me up. Um, and I realized that you kind of just have to pick something at some point, something that you find fulfilling, and that's what's going to give you confidence too. So I do think that through that process, I realized, it was a hard decision to make because everybody wants to be good at everything, right? Like I wish that I could do characters, but if I'm going to be really, really good at one thing, then I might as well pursue that. And I really believed in myself that I could do that. So I just made that decision on my own, and it was just through a process of trial and error. It probably took me, I want to say, maybe 6 months to a year of working with my mentor that I made that decision.
Nice. That's very good to know. Speaking of that, how long do mentorships usually last, or does it just like depend on the person?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that my situation was very unique because the mentorship that I was in it didn't really have a lot of structure. So he had experience working as a mentor in other classes, like for CGMA and things like that, but they were very, very specific time frames, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, or whatever. And you would only get 20 minutes with him a week. And
Yeah.
he decided to go out and do it on his own because he felt that the students weren't getting enough time. So the
Mhm.
structure that he had in place was that you sign up for his class, you pay a monthly fee, you have a meetup twice a month,
Mhm.
and you can show him whatever work you want. If you want specific things, he can offer you like a curriculum or offer you homework, but it's really, really self-initiated.
I see.
And then
Wow.
what was even more unique about it is that you could stay as long as you wanted.
Oh,
So
that's
there
so.
are some people that stayed for years. I was with him for 2 years. Um, I know people that are still with him that after I left, like 5 years. So that is a very unique situation. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that will offer that. Typically, you have, a couple of weeks or a couple of months with a mentor. So it just depends what you need, and if that is the case, just you can collect as many mentors as you want, right? Like
Yeah.
I think at one point I also took another mentorship with a different guy, but it was like an 8-week class,
Mhm.
and I learned a lot from him too. So I think you just have to be very committed to whatever choice you make in that regard.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Very cool. I guess jumping back to environment art, is there like a specific type of environments that you enjoy drawing the most? And yeah.
Hmm. That's a good question. I think that I really like, I really like color. Color is my favorite. I think that if I could just paint, that would be great, but I have to design also, so it makes the process much longer. I don't get the opportunity to do a lot of organic environments, so I think that that would be really exciting if I could pursue more forests and jungles and things like that. Typically I get asked to do a lot of like houses and cities and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I do like it, but I don't know if I have a favorite. I think as long as I have the opportunity to push the color, you know, if it's not going to be the same old blue sky, then that's enough to really get me excited.
Yeah.
Uh, but it kind of just depends. Like I went through a phase of painting a lot of city paintings because I just miss New York. So I like to do high density environments that have a lot of life. I think that that's probably my favorite.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I guess like for like specific like jobs you've had or specific like concept art pieces or VisDev and concept art work that you've done, do you have any like favorite projects or like favorite specific pieces that you've made?
Favorite specific pieces. Yeah, let's go to my portfolio.
Yeah. Everyone should go look at Kamille's portfolio.
No, I can pull it up.
Time as well.
All right, so it's camillistrator.com if anybody wants to go visit, but this is my portfolio here. And it changes over the years. I think right now the front page, it's mostly personal work, and I'm very proud that I have enough personal work that I can fill my portfolio with that. I think that that's definitely a goal that I would recommend people do so that directors get an idea of your point of view. So I mean, some of these images here, like for example, these two images are a couple of New York images based on parts of the city that I used to live in, Brooklyn, and they were really, really fun to paint. I was able to really push the colors and really push the graphic quality of the city, and that is a stylistic approach that I have developed over the years that I like to do. I can do perspective and all these complicated things, but if I can flatten out an image, that's my favorite way to paint. And so I think that if I'm able to create a flat image that has a lot of depth and emotion and story, then I'm really happy with it. So I feel like proud of these for that reason. A couple more down here. These are all paintings based on my environment where I live. This one here is the one that I talked about earlier. It's based on a place that I grew up, but you can see the change. You know, this painting I did in 2018, this house painting here, and the rest of these are from this year. So
Wow.
you can see how I have changed in my approach to art.
Mhm.
But I think that answers your question. You asked me my favorite piece, right?
Yes.
I guess I
Yeah,
don't really have a favorite piece right now. I mean,
that's so valid.
it's hard. It's hard because when you put your work out there, you have a certain feeling about it,
Mhm.
and you can't help but be influenced because other people will feel a certain way about it. You know, like I feel like a lot of people love, for example, this car painting,
Mhm.
and I don't understand why. They just love it. So it makes me feel like maybe I should love it too, but you know, it was just a quick
Yeah.
sketch that I did.
Mhm.
So so yeah, it's hard. It's kind of a hard question to answer.
Yeah, no worries. It's super cool to see like the way that your work has like evolved over time just as you've continued to practice and stuff. That's so cool. I guess like with all the projects that you've worked on, what would you say is like the most rewarding part of like working on a project, and like what tends to be like the most challenging parts?
Okay, I can talk you through some client work here.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all of this is safe to show.
We'll just edit out the video.
So remind me the question, the most rewarding and challenging parts.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, cool. So here's one example. When I worked for Buck, so I don't know if anybody familiar with Buck. They're a design house. They're a global design house, and I fell in love with them very early in my career when I started as a motion designer because that's typically the kind of work that you see come out of that place. And I had tried to apply for many, many years. So when I finally got the call to work for Buck, it was like a dream come true. I was like running around in my yard, you know, like screaming. Um, but I was again just very unprepared. So again, if you look at this client work, you'll see that it's very different than my personal work.
Mhm.
They're asking me to do things that I have never done before. So I'll give you kind of an idea of what this project was. This project was to create concepts for if anybody has Apple TV, um, they needed to create thumbnails for the different genres of Apple TV that when you first open the app. So like kids, family, comedy. So we just needed to make a lot of images for Apple to consider for that.
Mhm.
And they wanted so much art. It was every day, like every day,
Oh my
3 to 5 thumbnails, high quality thumbnails, right? And you couldn't just do a quick sketch. Like it had to be a fully fleshed out with lighting and everything. So it was really, really hard. It was like such a dream because I felt like I was really leveling up, but it was so stressful. I was also crying to sleep every night.
Understandable. That sounds like a lot.
But this is what I wanted, you know. This is so, you know, this one here was meant to be comedy. These images here,
Mhm.
these were pitches for the comedy. Um, you know, so there's just like a bunch of random things. And I worked really closely with the art directors to come up with these concepts. And it was just so much fun. It was so much fun to just turn out these ideas.
Mhm.
These ones down here are for independent films, so they're a little bit more subdued, you know, a little bit quieter, a little bit more like intellectual, and maybe a little whimsical. And then we needed a concept for music. So I started to create images for, you know, for what that would look like. Classic, like film noir type of stories here. So this is just a small collection. I had so many drawings, but this was a small collection of the ones that I like the most. Um, I think that they didn't pick any of these.
Oh no.
But it was really valuable. It was really valuable for everybody, I think, to just have that conversation. And I had to just pump these out. And this is the kind of thing where I'm saying having that fundamental skill set of understanding values, specifically just value structure and understanding scale and proportion. That's all I really needed to do this job and to do it quickly. And
Yeah.
so when you're doing your studies and you're doing perspective sketches and you just want to complain and you hate everything, just keep in mind that it's very, very important and it will help you no matter what. Okay.
Thank you. That, yeah,
um,
so cool.
that's I hope that answers that.
Yeah, definitely. You said you would have to crank out like 3 to 5 per day, right? How long would you spend
Yeah.
on each one? Because that's
Oh
impressive.
man, way too long. Honestly, because I was new, I don't I mean, I think every artist keeps this pretty close to their chest, but I was working with a couple of other artists that were just so amazing. And you know, when you that's what you want. You want to work with people that are so good because it makes you want to be better.
Mhm.
So I would spend hours on these and I shouldn't have had to, but I wasn't used to that kind of output. So I was literally working 8 to 12 hours,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
to create these concepts. And we had to show up 9 a.m. to
Oh,
present every morning. So you better be ready. So a
yeah.
lot of times I would, you know, have pencils down at like 5 o'clock or whatever, because they wanted they wanted a 9 a.m. and a 5 p.m. So they made sure
Mhm.
that you were at your desk working every day. So I would
Yeah.
do what I had to do, and then I would wake up very, very early to just like refine it, you know, just clean it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was crazy, it was madness, but they did take some time. I got faster towards the end where I was able to do, but you know, it depends. Some of them are more complicated than others, you know, like these guys on the stage, they're not that complicated. You
Yeah.
just need a background, foreground, you throw some lights on it, you're good to go. Uh, but some of these are a little more complicated, just in terms of the concept, you know, thinking of the concept and then putting it together. It could take some time, but like this one was very fast because I had just a brush that did books very fast. So I just threw a bunch of books on, and I was told to make it symmetrical, so that made it very, very easy and fast. Um, and you know, you can see it's the same guy in both of these images. I just changed the chair.
Yeah.
So you have to find shortcuts where you can.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Oh, that's so. Speaking of like the process of like creating the piece, do you have like a specific process or workflow that you go through typically?
I think it changes. If I have time, I prefer to work this way. I
Mhm.
prefer to work in values and get these kind of sketches approved first before I go into color. But I have found lately, because most of my work is in color, and I get called to do jobs in color a lot lately. And I think that they expect me to just pump out straight to color. But that's really difficult for me to do because designing in color for me are two different just two different things.
Mhm.
And I don't do my best work when I'm overwhelmed with that kind of choice. So I prefer to do this. I prefer to do this first, and then I can paint the color and really focus on that, and then try different palettes and different lighting.
Mhm.
So, it starts with reference, it starts with sketches, and it starts with that approval process. And then ideally, if everything works out, then that's how I would like to work.
Mhm.
But it changes. Some places ask me to do some 3D stuff, and I can, I can mock up a couple of things in Blender for approval that way if you need different camera angles.
Mhm.
Um, I hope that this isn't discouraging, but process needs to be flexible. I think that that's why one of the reasons that I recommend people to learn as many skills as they can, so that you can be adaptable. Especially now when there's so few jobs in animation.
Mhm.
I'm very lucky that I was able to jump into games, because games is a lot more stable right now. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without all the experience that I talked about. I know so many people that only have one skill, and they're freaking out because they don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, you better learn some new skills. So yeah, the process, I think for me, it just has to be flexible. It just depends on the project, and it depends on what the director needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's so cool. Very good to know as well. I guess my next question, kind of jumping off of that, when you're like assigned like something, like you're assigned, you have a new assignment and you're like figuring out how to draw something that you like may not be as familiar with, kind of like what is your like process for like researching and like gathering references and stuff like that?
Let's
You
see. That's a really good question. I think that I could talk a little bit about this project again here. So this project was based on a short story that I found online, but I wanted to adapt it to a very specific time frame. So I wanted it to be kind of 80s and kind of Bay Area, because
Mhm.
that's when I grew up. That's where I grew up, and so I had an idea in mind of what I was looking for. So I, but I wasn't familiar with a lot of things. I wasn't familiar with the kind of cars that people were driving then, and I wasn't familiar with some of the architecture. And so at that point, you just have to really, really go deep into your research. Like, I think that a lot of times people don't spend enough time researching. You should spend, um, you should spend, you should spend a lot of time collecting reference before you even start sketching. I would say a couple of days to a week, if you're on the job and you have enough time to do that. That's what I would recommend. So when I'm unfamiliar with something, I will just do a ton of research to the point that it's almost annoying. So for example, like this car I talked about, I didn't know how this car worked. So I got very specific about the kind of car that I liked. I liked this AMC Pacer. So
Mhm.
one of the things that helps in that process is just being committed to one decision. So I wanted to, to make sure that I was guided by that. So I had one car in mind that helped. And then from there, I found reference of different stylistic renderings, so
Mhm.
that you can make it, you have that connection now. You have like a target in mind of what you want to adapt to, as well as the real world reference. So I think that helps a lot when you are working with something unfamiliar.
Mhm.
And then from there, you just go through it. You just make as many designs as you can. And at this point, it's very important to work with somebody so that you're not in a vacuum. I did all of these sketches of these different styles and different proportions. I would not have probably, and at a certain point when you're pumping work out, it's hard to even be objective about it. It's hard to, it's kind of like, I don't care, just which one do you like? So it kind of helps. It kind of helps to have somebody else's feedback to just recontextualize your goals, and make sure that you're doing something that is worthwhile, and having those benchmarks in mind. So after doing all that, I was really happy with the end result. I did this car here, and I think that it was a nice kind of collection of everything that I researched. So I again, it's really hard for me to do vehicles and props. So I spent a lot of time just in that phase of developing and trying things.
That's awesome. I know you mentioned like a week to a few weeks, but how long did this process for this specific project take?
Well, this project was expansive because it was
Yeah.
meant to be an entire world.
Oh,
I
wow.
wanted to do, the entire environment and the characters and the vehicles. So it was many months, and I think that this doesn't have to be that long for everybody, but this is the first time I ever did it. This was the process of learning what the job is as a VisDev artist. And I think that everybody should go through a personal project to this extent so that you can understand what it's going to be asked of you, so that when you are on the job, it doesn't take that long. So yeah, this took maybe, I don't know, like maybe 6 months, but keep in mind, I had a job. This was only like in my free time that I was able to do this kind of stuff. But I had a very real goal in mind of what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to create work that looked professional, that looked like I should already be working. And I was able to do that, but it did take a lot of time, and I had to make sure that I was very focused in each effort. So I had to do the breakdowns of all the buildings and create texture paintings, and like this bottom image here is what I would call like a character lineup. The same thing that you would do if you were a character designer. A lot of those assignments will apply to environments. So they want to see what the environments are going to look like lined up next to each other, the same way that you would want to see a character, like a family, next to each other. So everything kind of connects. But that's an example of that, to get to these paintings here. And then from there, I was able to really, this is when I realized that I loved color and light, once I had a painting, and then I was able to just play in that world and see what kind of mood I could get just from different lighting situations. That very, very technical skill can be leveraged in so many ways.
Awesome. It's so cool. Oh my gosh. I love seeing the different lightings and shadows. That's so good. Oh my gosh. It's so cool. Yeah, I guess another question I have is how long does a piece usually take to create from like your ideation phases to finishing color? I guess we kind of talked about this, but like what is
Yeah.
like the range for like any of the other work that you've done that you haven't mentioned?
I think it just depends. If you're working, for example, if you're working on something that is a completely new concept, that if you're working on a film, like for example, if you're working on Zootopia, right? You're working on concepts that are kind of new, but still a little bit familiar. You want a city that is for animals. So you have some basis in reality to focus on, what a city looks like, but the design work comes in when you're thinking about different proportions and the functionality of that space. So, it can take a little bit longer, but I think the thing that will help is having clear direction from your director. When I'm on the job, I try to not spend longer than a week on a painting. And that even feels long to me. Like I would love, I think at this point, to be able to pump out a couple of paintings a week, 2 to 3 paintings a week, but it's different for everybody. If you talk to somebody like, there are some artists that can pump out 2 to 3 paintings in a day. It just depends. If you're working as just a background painter and you're being fed designs like line work designs and a color key, then you can pump out 3 to 5 paintings in a day because all you're focused on is painting, right? But if you're starting from literal scratch, from zero, and you have to do all of the design work and the paint work, then it can take longer. So it is a range. But that's a conversation I would have with your director about the expectations, so that if you are taking too long.
Yeah. Oh wow. That's reassuring though, that it's like there's a range, because I feel like I always thought it was like very, very, very fast, but there's a range, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be fast. I think that people like fast.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
if you deliver quality work, everybody says there's fast, cheap, and good. You can't never have all three, right? If you get 2 out of 3, then you should be fine. That's all you need for your career. So you just have to think about that, like what you want to focus on. If you want to just be fast, then I would recommend doing a lot of practice of just 1 layer paintings. And I think at the point that I'm at in my career now, if I wanted to do a quick study, like a lot of the paintings on my portfolio, I did in 1 day, or less than a day. But I have nobody watching me. I'm art directing myself, so I can say it's done whenever I want. but that's just part of the job.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Very cool. I guess, are there any other pointers or tips or advice that you would like to give that hasn't been mentioned so far?
um well, let's see. Sure, there's a couple of things. I think I have a couple book recommendations.
Ooh.
So these are recommendations. There's so many books that you can get, right? But these specific collection of books have helped me the most. For this graphic LA book and this color and light book are probably the most accessible. A lot of people know them, especially the color and light book is a classic book
James Gurney.
that yeah, of course, he's a master, and I really recommend studying that book. Is really, really hard. But what I like about Graphic LA is that it goes through a very practical process for how this artist works, and he talks about his thought process in developing symbols for real life. So he considers what his work is as a symbol, which I think is really helpful because when we're creating images and stylizing things, the main thing we want is the viewer to understand what they see, right? You should understand if you're stylizing it, it shouldn't be so crazy that they don't know what it is. So he talks about creating a tree symbol and creating a car symbol and making them all work together. So I highly recommend that book. It's very affordable. Alla Prima is it's hard to get. It's very expensive, I understand, but it is also really, really helpful to look at traditional masterwork so that you make sure your work is fresh. And even if you only work digitally, I think it's important to look at traditional paintings to just kind of help inform your work as well. And this book, Color Study, I think is a little bit more advanced if you want to focus more on color. It's just a lot of observational skills that he's teaching. But I have found it to be really helpful at this point in my career, just when you're trying to get a fresh take on color. So that's one thing that I recommend people do.
Awesome. Well, okay. This has been so cool. I think I went through all the questions that I have. Oh, I guess this is like a more practical question, but like what software do you use and like or like what software or softwares?
Yeah, I think Photoshop is the industry standard.
Mhm.
I highly recommend Blender as well. Just if you don't want to do Blender, you don't have to, but I know that it is really helpful right now. And you can get by just using SketchUp. I do that all the time just to do quick and dirty things. But honestly, I've been really in love with Procreate. I've been doing professional client work on Procreate.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that is that is definitely something to consider. But when you're on the job and you're doing a production job, like Procreate is good for concept work because you're just delivering a final painting. But if you need to deliver a layered painting, then definitely Photoshop because everybody can work in Photoshop.
Makes
But
sense.
that's kind of it.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, now I think that I've gone through all the questions I have. So now I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna open it up to the audience. So if the audience has any questions, I can awkwardly run around with a microphone. And yeah, okay. First question. Oh, and if you want to say your name, I just tried your name and your question.
Sure. Hi, I'm Veronica Weinberg, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the differences between working in animation versus the game industry, and kind of how you got into the game industry from a animation or just plain VisDev background.
Yes, thank you, Veronica. So the question is the difference between games and animation and how I got into games with a animation background, I believe is the question. But I think that it's kind of the other way around for me because I did start in games first, which I think helped. I think once you start working in games in any capacity, it helps you. So my first job in games was just I was just doing texture painting, and you don't even have to get a job at a big game studio. Any kind of game experience is going to be so helpful because the main thing about working at games that's different from animation is the limitations and the technical conversations that you'll have. So you're going to be working with engineers a lot more than you would as an artist in animation. You tend to be siloed a lot more in animation. Just with the art team. But I think games is one of the hardest industries because it's a combination of everything. You have writing, you have film, you have interactive design. So you have to constantly all be working together. So I think that it is easier, I would say, to work from games and then go into animation than the other way around, because they're just very different animals in the day-to-day process. I hope that helps to answer your question. Well, I would also add that going to Parsons helped a lot, because there was a big focus on game design at Parsons. So that just kind of helped me get started.
So cool. Anyways, oh yes, we have another question.
Hi, my name's Sophie. I don't think you can see me. I'm like at the end. Sorry. Not that it necessarily matters, but I just want to say I really enjoy like the perspective and like the atmosphere you have in your paintings and the work you show. Do you have any like recommendations for like building perspective skills? Because like I feel like that's something that there's not a lot of like resources that are like talked about a lot. So just wondering if you have any like recommendations or tips for that.
Sure, that's a great question. You know, I have this book that I've had for so many years, and it's out of print. I wish that I could recommend it to you, but it's out of print. But I think that there are so many classes on perspective. I think the only way to really learn perspective is to dive into it and focus on it entirely for like 3 months. You just have to bite the bullet. And I think that goes for every new skill you learn. Like, I think one of the main mistakes that I made as an undergrad, I was trying to do too many things at once. Spending 3 months, 1 to 3 months on any one subject, you will be so good at it. So, you know, start with like the basics. I would say if you don't want to take a class, you would just have to go through the like, what is 2-point, what is 3-point, do all of those exercises, you know, do that weird globe exercise where you have all the things coming out of it. And do a lot of studies of your environment. Like, I think just doing a sketchbook, having a sketchbook everywhere you go, and do structural sketches of the city or of your room, that is very helpful. When you're doing studies, I think it's just important to have one goal in mind. So if you do studies of just perspective and you don't worry about it being pretty, as long as you're learning how the angles work together. And then, you know, I didn't want to bring this up, but, you know, Procreate is a big cheat for perspective because it will do it for you. So if you do some practice stuff in Procreate, you'll just happen to learn. You'll just learn along the way, because it has that tool to support you. But I will, after this, I will send a collection of links of resources that I recommend to the administrators so they can share it with you guys.
Yay! Okay, so thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Rhea, and I was wondering if you can speak more to your experiences balancing like portfolio building and personal projects while working full time. Since like I'm an art student too, but like I have a huge academic workload. And so like I just find that like just even thinking or like compositing for personal projects, like I have to carve out the time. Even when I do carve out the time, I end up just like wanting to go to bed, and like the work I put out is the best. So I was just wondering how you balance like work with like your art, and how you just have the motivation to kind of build your portfolio and just like improve yourself as an artist on nights and weekends.
I love this question. It's so real. You know, I think that there's a couple different ways to look at it. First of all, I really respect how much work it is to be in school. I think that it's probably the hardest that you're going to work. I kind of have a caveat to that, but it is the time I think it should be the hardest that you ever work, because you're just learning so much, and you're learning about life at the same time. I think that in terms of motivation, I have a secret that I don't necessarily share that often, but you know, my mother passed away while I was in college. So she was such a big support to me, and I just knew that I had to make this work for her. So that was always my motivation. Like, there was just no other option. And that's kind of what kept me going, even through all those nights of not sleeping and having 10 jobs and all of that. Like I just knew that there was no, like I said, there was no other choice. And, you know, on top of that, I just was really sad all the time if I wasn't creating. And I knew that if I wasn't going to make this work, I was going to be really unfulfilled. So what helps me in my day-to-day in creating these big projects is to just, like, when I started working with my mentor and I had an idea of what the project I was going to work on, I made a PDF of all of the paintings that I wanted to do for that project. And then I broke it down. So for example, for the house painting, I knew that I needed to do a breakdown of the house. I needed the car and I needed the characters. So then I would just keep breaking it down to the minutia of like thumbnail sketches. So once you have that list in front of you, then you can really take a look at what you can handle and then you can also determine how long it's going to take you, because you can just start to break down your day. Today, I'm going to do sketches for the house, and then I'm going to do color keys, and then I'm going to do that. So then you can have a plan laid out for how long it's going to take you to get from A to B. And you just keep doing that for every assignment that you give yourself. And, you know, doing personal projects is really difficult because you have to be accountable to yourself, right? So what helps with that is just kind of having a reward. You know, like I will just play video games all day and I'll eat pizza when I finish this painting. That really helps. Or I'm going to go out and be in the sun and not work. I think it is important to have those days. I typically had Saturdays where I didn't do any work because my mental health would have just really suffered otherwise. So I have a two-part answer. I think that you have to be very willing to sacrifice a lot of sleep and a lot of time at this point when you're building, because there's just no other way. And you have to make sure that, you know, don't kill yourself. But a lot of people make a big deal about burnout and grinding, but I'm just a firm believer that you have to do it. I'm sorry. There's some point in your life where you just have to do it, and it will pay off. I promise. I promise. I hope that helps.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. It was very insightful. And thank you for trusting us with that. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Oh, yes.
Okay, hi, my name is Rin, and I was kind of curious, when you moved out to New York and stuff like that, like, given like, I feel like there's a lot of like kind of discussion, especially because like the industry is like kind of staying within like the LA area of like California, like when it comes to at least the animation industry. I was just kind of curious how, like, as like someone like as like for us, because we live here in Michigan, how would you find like the best way to network towards people that live in those kind of areas outside of moving to those areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had this question a lot because I only moved to LA in 2019. So I started my career in San Francisco and in New York. I think at this point, it doesn't matter as much because of the pandemic. A lot of people are remote, but those connections of meeting people are really invaluable. So if you can find a way to at least go to conventions like CTN and Lightbox and making connections that way, people will remember you and they will be more willing to hire somebody that they've already met, regardless of where you live. So that would be the first step that I would recommend that you work towards, is just getting yourself out there and making that FaceTime. And keeping that follow-up in mind. But on top of that, I have a lot of people ask me, how do you know when you're ready to apply for jobs? That's not your job to say. You just apply. Somebody else is going to tell you if you're ready, right? Like, you just do it. Like, I don't be afraid to apply. There's nothing that's, you know, they're going to say no, whatever. You just keep it moving. So yeah, I think just try as much as you can to create connections however you can. Like, Discord communities are fantastic. You never know who's on there. So just be open to trying that. But I do say my turning point was going to CTN for the first time and making those connections there. So that would be huge.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Vin. My question was, it's a little less like that, but have you participated in any game jam? Because I know that that's a very good place to like not just build skill with collaboration, but also specifically working in art when it comes to video games
In LA?
or game jams in general. Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat one more time the question?
My question was about game jams.
Oh, game jams, I see. Okay.
Have you like participated in any? Do you have any specific experience about that kind of stuff? Because I know that they're very good places to get experience with collaboration and working in video games.
Okay, thank you for repeating. Yes, game jams are amazing. I did a lot of game jams when I was at Parsons, and I think that they're a great way to kind of learn what you're good at and kind of learn what your role would be in in a real environment. When I was at Parsons, we had hackathons, we had overnight hackathons, and I learned so much. I think if you can get that kind of experience early, it's going to help you become more confident. It is a big commitment, and it is really tiring because they usually are very fast turnaround type of experiences. But if you can find them at your school, or if you can enter into broader challenges, I highly recommend that. I don't think it really matters. I think those are easier to get into anywhere in the world. You can always do it remotely. But I remember we had a hackathon at the Natural History Museum in New York, and we stayed the night there.
That's so
And
cool.
it was so much fun. We made like a dinosaur game. It was so amazing. Like, we did not sleep well because we had like little cots all over the place. But it was such an amazing experience. So if, I think that the online thing is great. You can make a lot of connections that way, but that kind of experience, like, it's kind of once in a lifetime. And do it while you're young before you get old and tired like me. I can't do it now. I hope that answers your question.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Going once, going twice. Oh, yes, we have a question.
Hi, my name's Kiara, and I guess my question for you is, like, I have a obsession with digital brushes since ever since I was a kid and learned digital art. So I kind of wonder, like, what are your brushes? Like, do you just use the default brushes in Photoshop, or do you have a special home version that you?
Yeah, I think that the default brushes are great, but they're no fun, right? A lot of people say that they just use default brushes, and I don't believe them. I have a set that I love. It's my favorite, and everybody can get it. It's the Mike McCain brush set. It works both in Photoshop and in Procreate. So I love that brush set. I lean very heavily on it, especially for trees. So yeah, I recommend checking that out. But I do think that when you're starting out, it is, I think the reason why people recommend default brushes is that you don't get spoiled by fancy effects before you're really ready for them. When you saw my mushy paintings, it was because I was working with too many brushes that I didn't understand. So if you don't have the fundamental skill set, it doesn't matter what brushes you're using. You're still going to just be making, the kind of work that the level that you're at. So I will tell you my secret: the Mike McCain brush set. You can find it online on Gumroad, but yeah, try out a full painting with just a round brush and see what you can get.
Very good advice. All right. Any other questions? Oh, could you repeat what the brush set you said was?
I'll send you some links, but it's Mike McCain.
Mike McCain. Mike McCain. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions from the audience? Cool. That's okay. Do you have any questions for us?
Totally
Well,
fine. I mean, I'm just really grateful that you guys had me, and I'm really happy to help. And I am available if anybody, feel free to give my info. I'm happy to answer any questions after this. Yeah, I just, I just want to make sure that everybody keeps, just keeps it moving. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy, and there's a lot to learn. But but yeah, I'm just really happy to meet you guys and offer whatever advice I can.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Everyone, give Kamille a round of applause. Yeah, you can't see them. Oh my God, never mind, I won't do that.
You're gonna get motion sickness.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I've learned so much. I don't know about you guys, but I've learned a lot. So your knowledge is greatly appreciated, and you are a lovely individual. So thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you guys. It's definitely mutual, and good luck with school. I know it's probably finals time around this time of year, so good
Yeah,
luck with that. Cool. Well,
awesome.
stay in touch, and I'll keep in touch with you guys about those links, and yeah,
Thank you so
good
much.
luck with everything, guys.
We'll keep in touch with you as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.